in. While we're doing that, I am going to start our presentation because we want to be efficient with our time, because we do know that you sat in and worked with children all day and you are ready to start your evening. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Ms. Sanders and Mr. Duncan, if you could continue to allow staff into the waiting room. But again, good afternoon, everyone. I am Pierrette Finney, and I am the Chief Academic Officer for Alexandria City High School. Also former Titan. I started my administrative career as a Titan at the King Street campus before moving on to the middle school and then to central office. And I'm here joined with one of my colleagues, Carmen Sanders, which you all knew her as a dean and an academic principal and also a campus administrator. And so she is now our executive director of instructional support. And so we do thank you and value your presence here today. And so today we are going to just make sure that we're giving you timely updates about what's going on with the high school project, how it will impact you. We did look at the some of you put some questions in our Google form, and we did look at some of those questions. Some of them we can answer right now. Some of the questions we're still planning, but hopefully you'll find this presentation to be very informative and one that you will walk away with knowledge you may not have had before you joined us. And so we'll go ahead and get started. And so basically for our presentation today, we have 5 essential questions. What happened during the school diagnostic visits with the Learner Center Collaborative Team? And so the Learner Center Collaborative Team is our consultant group that is working with us. They started working with us last school year. How did it inform the work of the high school project? What is the guiding coalition? How does it support decision-making, and how can you be involved, meaning you as ACHS staff? What are the most recent updates pertaining to the educational programming for the high school project? And then what are our next steps? And so this presentation is designed to take you through where we were, where we are, and then where we're going. And of course, if you have questions, you can put some questions in the chat. I'll also send out our Google form, which is our mechanism for capturing questions that you may have. And then we're also recording this presentation for your colleagues who may not have been able to attend. We'll send the presentation out to staff as well. Okay, so where we were. So as many of you know, those of you that have been around Alexandria City High School for a while, this is a process that has started a long time ago, actually in 2018, 2019. And there were conversations prior to 2018, 2019, to be very transparent, to talk about the development of a connected high school network. And the tenets behind that, the spirit behind it, has remained relatively the same, and connecting community, diversity and strength, relationships and community. But one of the pieces that is really important to our work now, and was also important to the work back in 2018, is the last bullet point about student choice and flexibility over multiple pathways to a diploma. And so when Carmen picks up with the second part of our presentation, she'll give you some more insight into what the academies and pathways looks like and how that will impact your work moving forward. So when we started working with the Learner Center Collaborative last year, we garnered student voice, staff voice, and some of the just information gathering that we needed as we started planning out the next steps of the process. And so on May 16th and 17th, the Learner Center Collaborative came and did diagnostic groups with not only Alexandria City High School students, but George Washington and Francis C. Hammond middle school students, because those will be kids that will be coming up to you next year. And so of all of those focus groups, more than 100 students, 120 students participated. And then there were more than 15 central office staff who also engaged in the planning discussion. There were also staff and family visits, and so staff meaning ACHS staff on June 12th. And so the staff focus was basically on receiving recommendations from licensed and support staff from Alexandria City High School. And also the school-based leadership team from last school year was also interviewed. And then there were parent sessions to garner input from parents, just to engage them in a group activity so they could talk about their hopes and dreams for their children. And, pretty much from that focus group, we had all levels of parents attending. And so on June 13th, we participated in what we call our guiding coalition. So there are two pieces to this. There's a working group and there's a guiding coalition. And so as we're going through the presentation, if the working group is something that you feel compelled to be a part of, we definitely encourage you to reach out to your school-based leadership to discuss how you can be a part of the working group. Because while we have the framework and we're moving forward with planning, we do honor and respect that the high school staff and your voice is very important in moving forward. And so we want to make sure that we are capturing and hearing from you as well. But to go back to the guiding coalition, so once we have feedback from our working groups, that feedback goes to the guiding coalition. And the guiding coalition consists of central office staff, school-based administrators, and also school board members, where they look at some of the outcomes that and recommendations that we've received from the working groups. Some of the work that has been developed out of that from the working group to the guiding coalition is the ACPS learner profile with competencies. There's a draft learner model that will be presented to staff in the coming day or coming weeks, and then also the working groups were formed. And the working groups are based on consist of different areas that are an area of focus that I'll explain in a moment that we do have staff participating on. And so from the guiding coalition and the working groups, there were 4 core values or drivers that have been guiding our work ever since. Definitely equity and how we're providing equitable experiences for students and staff, relationships and community achievement and growth, and particularly student choice in multiple pathways and students having a variety of ways to obtain their high school diploma. And so where we are, so right now we are what's called the decision-making and planning process. And so some of you had asked questions about construction and how can I get more information about construction? And I believe Mr. Duncan did send an email yesterday that details previous construction updates. There were questions about the pool, questions about the deck. And of course, those things are still being planned, and there will be staff, particularly staff that we know that will be involved in working in the pool or working in different areas to get your input and voice. But right now, we are pretty much right here in, so for spring 2022 up until 2023, they were building the foundation and installation. From spring to winter, so right now, if you drive past Minnie Howard, you pretty much see the whole structure of the building up. And so from now through spring of 2024, they are on the inside and they're finishing the interior of Minnie Howard. Of course, you know, certain things have been ordered, such as furniture and different things that beautify the school that are in collaboration with school colors. And then moving forward, Mr. Duncan has been meeting with our facilities team on different aspects of the interior. And so by the spring of 2024, phase 1 will be completed. And then there'll still be some existing things that have to go on even after the building is built and moved into, you know, particularly the demolition of the existing building, you know, well field installation, athletic field installation. And so the entire phase 1 and phase 2 will be completed by summer of 2025. But within phase 2, which starts in the summer of 2024, is when the new athletic fields will be built and constructed. And so I know those of you that are coaches or have particularly had your sports at Minnie Howard, I know that is of particular interest to you. And I know Mr. Parker is working very closely on where different sports will take place during this construction phase of the field, the new fields. And so in conjunction with construction, there's an educational programming. So the high school project is two-pronged. It is the construction phase, but there's also the educational programming phase. And that's the phase that really involves most of us on this call. And as I shared before, there's been a draft learner profile, revisions to the learning model. And then, of course, the development of the program of studies has already taken place, and it was presented last week by Ms. Sanders and myself to the school board for approval. And so we also have 4 work groups that are currently working: educational programming, operations, student experience, communications, and engagement. And of course, staff involvement is needed and is welcomed in the working group process. And so if any of those 4 areas are areas that you feel passionate about, please let your school-based administrators know, because we really do want your input and feedback and participation as we're planning for the new Mini Howard, or really the Connected High School Network, because it's going to impact everybody in both campuses. So as you know, Mini Howard is currently 9th grade, and we're moving to now having 2 really large 9 through 12 campuses. So there will be a lot of movement, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. There'll be just a lot of things that will look different. And so even if you're at the King Street campus, you're going to be impacted, because you may either have to move a classroom within King Street, or you may also be at the Mini Howard campus. And that's the same for Mini Howard. You're obviously going to be moving out of your current building, either into the new Mini Howard or into the King Street campus. And so all of those will be based upon the situation of pathways, and the academies will be at both campuses, but where staff lands in particular will be based upon the pathway. And so again, the working groups, I keep highlighting in yellow, staff involvement is needed. We definitely need you in the working groups, and your participation in the working groups. And so if you feel compelled, please make sure that you are reaching out to your school-based administrators. And so where we are going, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Sanders, who's our Executive Director of Instructional Support, to continue with our program of studies and other aspects.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Finney. I'm so glad to see your faces here on this call. I want to start with some program of studies key terms that were highlighted as a part of the board presentation on, October 19th. So academies, as you know them, will change in the 2024-25 school year. Outlined in the 24-25 program of studies, you will see these terms that are listed here on the slide that will help the public, help you better understand how core content courses can be grouped with elective courses to provide students a richer, more rigorous learning experience that is connected to their college and/or career interest. So just to highlight a portion of the definitions here on this slide, academies are an umbrella of instructional or programmatic themes that provide comprehensive curriculum within a specified field or concentration area, which is different than the academies around student grade levels and last names as we know them now. Pathways would be a sequence of courses, resources, and experiences needed for graduation and for certification area. And then the small learning communities, what I want to highlight here in this definition is that it's a culmination of students' 4-year experience. And so the purpose of the small learning communities through the core content and elective grouping is to provide a supportive environment in the school that helps learners connect, collaborate, and grow. Listed on this slide are the proposed academies and pathways for the 2024-2025 school year. The educational programming team is still determining the best titles and course sequences that would fit into each pathway. We want to ensure that the pathways of study are clear based on the academy title. So we are listening, taking notes, and reviewing the recommendations from the meetings that we have been attending, and we are going to develop plans at the working group level, and then we will go to the guiding coalition for feedback. But for the purposes of this presentation, we just wanted to highlight some of the options from the pathways that we have thought through that are not quite yet established for next year. And so just some key takeaways. We are very interested in your voice around this project. We know that staff involvement is going to be incredibly important, as you all will be the ones to take this information not only to other staff members within the schools, but to the communities, because many of you are Alexandria residents. And so when you have the information, you can take the information and champion this project throughout Alexandria community. Also, students will choose an academy and pathway and still have access to courses of interest. We've received so much feedback around ensuring that students are not feeling that they don't have flexibility in the courses that they take. And we want to really dispel that as we move forward. The academies and pathways are not new concepts in educational institutions. We are incorporating it to ensure that students have a sense of agency, a sense of belonging, and a sense of connectedness to the school community. And then finally, project-based learning will be a staple for all of us across campuses, as well as student exhibitions and real-world career connections. Our students asked for that as we did our diagnostic visits in May of 2023. Our students said they needed to have real-world connections and trust with the adults that they worked with. And so this is our opportunity to create enhanced experiences with our students through the pathways. And so looking into the future, we have a few things that are happening right now. We are going to continue to engage staff and the community around the program of studies and answering questions through Ask ACPS, answering questions during PTSA meetings and our community meetings, allowing our community to be able to preview the program of studies, as well as ensuring that the high school project work groups are up and running and getting recommendations to the Guiding Coalition. Work groups will continue to communicate milestones. It's almost very much like a little piece of machinery where all of the different pieces are working together to keep this project going. So there's not one specific thing that is happening in isolation. There is so much collaboration and communication that is happening around this project. And so we want to keep the momentum going and keep us moving forward. And so we will continue with our work group meetings and work group recommendations in November and December of 2024. So if you are interested, as Dr. Finney mentioned, please email us so that you can be added to the groups. And then academic advisement and the master schedule development will start January 24 to March 2024. You will hear more about that right after the program of studies has been approved, hopefully November 2nd. And then notification of staff locations will take place after the master schedule has been relatively built in late April 2024. As you all know, the master schedule is a consistent work in progress throughout the months leading up to the opening of school. And so we want to be very clear that late April 2024 is when the staff will have notification of your locations, whether it be King Street campus or Minnie Howard campus. And I will turn it back over to Dr. Finney.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. And before we go into questions that you have in the chat or questions that you may have to come off of mute, I would like to welcome our superintendent, Dr. Kay Wyatt, to our meeting space and offer her an opportunity if she wanted to send any greetings or say hello or just add anything about the high school project. Dr. Kay Wyatt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Finney. I just want to say thank you for putting this together, and we just want to make sure that we are keeping staff informed along the way and making sure we answer your questions. We know that this is a busy time, but it's also a very exciting time, and to have these opportunities to have your input is very important to us moving forward. So thank you for doing that. My apologies for being delayed. I was coming from a budget meeting, which is that time of year. So I just want to also take a moment to thank everyone for the start of a great school year. I think I'm seeing lots of shifts and cultures and great work. I know when I go out in the community, I'm hearing great things. So please make sure you all, own that and receive that. Because of you, we are getting some of those great comments and feedback. So thank you, Dr. Finney. Thank you, Mr. Duncan, and thank you to all the staff here today.
And thank you, Dr. K. White, and thank you for prioritizing your time to be here. I know it means a lot to myself and Carmen, and I'm sure also to the high school staff that they know that this is important to you.
Yes,
And
it is. What most people don't know, I was a former high school teacher, so I try not to say it too much. But I have a little bit of a spot in my heart for high school, but I'm really grateful for all you do. So thank you. And, just know that we're going to work through this and we're here to support you. And I think we can't say that enough. So being at the high school, was it last Friday? It seems like so long ago now.
last Friday.
And just interacting with many of you just really warms my heart to see the connections that you're making with our children as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so the only thing I see in the chat are just volunteers who want to be a part of the working group, and we truly appreciate that. I can't stress it enough. Between now and the time that we get to the point where we are developing the master schedule, your voice is respected and your voice is important. And we really, you don't meet that often, but when we do meet, we definitely want you to be a part of that process so that your voice is heard. Some of the feedback that we've received from parents have really informed a lot of the work that we do moving forward. And so I know those of you with boots on the ground daily in the schools working with kids will also have input. I cannot forget my SPED staff. We really need your support in how that looks moving forward for our students with disabilities and also our EL staff. And how we are able to provide accommodations across both campuses. So your voice needs to be heard and a part of the planning process. And so as Mr. Duncan put in the chat, please email your campus administrator if you would like to be a part of the working groups. And we've promised not to monopolize too much of your time, but your voice is really important. So we would like for you to prioritize just a little bit of time to be involved. And so there's another question. How will students be prioritized for their preferred courses, students in a pathway, students outside of pathway? And so I will let Ms. Hardaway present that to staff as she further develops the master schedule. If I could kind of surmise, very similar to what's being done now. I know students have their first, second, and third choice electives and different things, but we'll let her have an opportunity to present that to staff when she's ready, once the master schedule once the master schedule gets going. Mr. Humphrey, I had the same question with Dr. Nickerson when we met with parents last week. Where is the International Academy in that in our structure? And so those are ongoing conversations that will be taking place in the working group. But there's just more conversation that needs to be had about where it is in the structure. And so that is top of mind for Dr. Nickerson. When will staff know what pathway they are assigned to? So for pathways, keep in mind pathways are based upon your electives. And so it's more of what academy a staff member would be assigned to, and that would take place mostly in the spring when staff receive their assignment about their staff, their school location. And is that at the same time as which campus they will be in? Yes, that would be at the same time, but not necessarily the pathway unless you're an elective teacher, but for core content teachers, it would be which academy are you a part of? How will students travel between campuses? How can we ensure that they will arrive on time? Ms. Lawson, you must be in our meetings because those are huge questions that we are discussing at this time. So students will travel as they do now, but conversations we're having are just a range of things, how to create a schedule where students do arrive on time. Do we need to stagger the schedule? Does one school start earlier, one school start later, meaning by 5 minutes or 10 minutes to give enough time to, ensure that students are able to get there on time. So that question is one of the questions that will be answered through our working group. But thank you for raising that question again. Will students be free to take any elective regardless of their pathway? Yes. So if Ms. Sander, if you Ms. Sanders shared earlier, that students will have their pathway courses, but they are free to choose electives as they are interested in. And so they're not just confined to just electives within their pathways. They can take other elective courses. And will students get a priority for a pathway class if they are in a particular pathway? So that's going to be conversation that's going to be continuing in the working group, in the discussions we're having in the working group. What will these pathways mean for SPED students? Great question. Those are conversations that we are having in the working group, and that is part of the reason why we definitely need our SPED staff. As a part of the working group, we know there's only a small captive number of you, and how do we ensure that our students with disabilities are being supported across both campuses, while at the same time not stretching our SPED staff thin, because we do know between doing IEPs and everything else that you all have to do, it is a challenge. Let me see here. I don't want to lose my place in the questions.
And Dr. Finney, I can
Yes.
ask the questions while you process the response. Okay. Will Academy and campus staff information be available to staff before the intent to return form?
So the division-wide intent to return forms typically come out, if I'm not mistaken, January or February. We will not be able to share which academy and pathway and campus staff will be at until April, when the master schedule is done. Keeping in mind that this is well before staff would have typically known their courses, course loads, which we typically have not sent that out until the summertime. But that is the earliest that we can notify staff, based upon getting students registered, course tallies, and giving Ms. Hardaway time to develop the master schedule. And so the earliest possible moment that we can let staff know would be in April.
Can you explain a little more about the smaller learning community? Are you envisioning that to be similar to current academies, but aligned to a pathway or academy, where each group of students have an admin, counselor, social worker assigned to them?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I'm going to answer it in two ways. As far as the small learning community, it is the idea that groups of students would be within a same academy, and then they would have pathway courses that they take, thus creating their small learning community. Now, how the administrative structure, the counselor structure, social worker structure, that is still being worked out in the work groups. And of course, in collaboration with Mr. Duncan and his administrative team regarding which administrators will be at which campus, which social workers, which counselors. And so the small learning community is designed to create a smaller environment where students are connected to a captive group of teachers. But the administrative part of it, the counseling part, the social worker part is still to be determined.
Will additional hiring be taking place to accommodate for transition in instructional models? Will departments know what hiring they are able to do to meet those needs, specifically regarding EL support?
Thank you. So that's a great question as well. And actually, in working with Mr. Duncan, we're having our staffing meetings with HR on Monday, and we're having staffing meetings with our budgeting office in the coming days as well. He has developed a matrix where he has pretty much outlined what his needs are. And so we are working with HR and the budgeting office to really look at where the needs are and how the division can support. But keeping in mind, it is a budget, it's what we're considered a flat budget year, meaning there's not a lot of flexibility to hire new FTEs, meaning new full-time teaching positions. So we will have to look at how we can fully staff both campuses within the resources that we have. And there may need to be some flexibility within things to make that happen.
Right. Is the expectation that next year core class curricula be modified to conform with particular pathways?
Ms. Sanders, I'll give you that question as instructional support.
So, yes. And so when you say modified, the class curricular would not be modified. I believe that the instructional approach around project-based learning is what we want to enhance. The current courses of studies and descriptions will still be maintained as we fully recognize that these courses are developed to are required by the Virginia Department of Education for graduation purposes. And so they will be grouped to support a specific career or college area of interest, but modification of curricula would not necessarily happen. All right, next question. Sorry if you already addressed this, but will teachers have to travel between campuses for their teaching schedule? For example, is it possible that a teacher could have red day classes at King and blue day classes at Minnie?
That is a great question. And that honestly, that question can't be answered until Ms. Hardaway finishes the master schedule. So I don't want to say, no, it's not possible, or yes, it is possible, until we actually see the master schedule. I know that the team is working very hard to minimize movement of students across campuses and also movement of staff across campuses, but I don't want to say that it's not a possibility, but we won't know until the master schedule is complete. And I believe that may have been the last question. We will be meeting monthly. Oh, hold on. How is this going to impact our PLCs? So I would definitely encourage instructional staff to participate in the working groups so you can be a part of that planning process, because particularly you will have content areas across 2 campuses. You'll have teams of, not teams of teachers, but elective teachers across 2 campuses. And so we'll have to look very creatively about what PLCs look like. And then there's another comment. Hold on. I'm sorry.
It says, it says, it sounds like there's an expectation that staff may have to change their building, classroom location, and instructional approach to content. Will we have the time in the school year to plan for this?
Yes, so that is the sole purpose of us starting our meetings right now, to bring to top of mind what some of the needs of staff will be, and we will plan that out throughout the school year. We will be hiring movers to move items, particularly if you are being moved to another campus or moved to another classroom. There will be movers that will move your items. However, we do ask that staff pack their personal items. And if by chance there is a need to have some movement or unpacking take place after the contract, we will be working with the budgeting office to ensure that staff are compensated after contract.
It also says, we'll be compensated for this movement. As Dr. Finney stated, there would be a moving company that would do that.
Yeah. And so if there are no more questions, I would definitely end by saying thank you and appreciative of your time. There are 67 of you here, but I know there are close to 400 staff members, and we do not want anything regarding the high school project to come as a surprise to anyone. And so we will continue to meet monthly. I will send out this presentation along with the recording when it's ready to all staff so that everyone has an opportunity to listen and hear, but also encourage you to be a part of the planning process and work groups as we move forward, because that will answer some of your questions, but it will also provide an opportunity for you to have input in some of the decisions that are being made. And so if there are no other questions, we will see you all next month when we have our next monthly update. And it's such a pleasure, as always, to be in front of Alexandria City High School staff. I feel so nostalgic when I'm there. Truly enjoyed my time when I worked there and missed a lot of you. For those of you that were there when I was there, just truly appreciate you all. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Ms. Sanders, we can stop the recording.